Hello, sat sri akal ji, ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ?
जी चढ़ती कला जी चढ़ती कला. How are you?
Yeah, very good. It's so lovely to see you.
Same here, same here.
You been well?
I have. It's been crazy, but yeah, it's so many opportunities, so many things are happening that I feel so energized, I guess.
That's excellent. You know, that truly is Chardi Kala, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's things that you don't even think of and how the world is so small and a smile goes a long way or just it opens my eyes every time.
Brilliant. So, Rajnarind, in this conversation, we're going to look at the connections, and you've already started on that theme about how the world is small and we can see the connectedness. And we're going to look at education this time. And I know that you were brought up in the US, and so like myself, being brought up in the UK, we have both maybe our initial or our major education has been in the Western kind of education perspective rather than Sikhi being the main education. So it's about the connections, how have we formed connections between what we've been learning from our Western, European, US perspectives, and how does it relate to what we know about Sikhi from our own research or our family teaching us or our society teaching us.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could start by telling you a story that just recently happened.
Great. Go for it.
So the story goes like this. I never realized how non-diverse the community where I grew up, where I went to school, my entire elementary to high school graduation, like that, not elementary to high school journey. I never realized, right? I just realized this because I went back for my reunion. And I went back to, I grew up on the Jersey Shore. So I went back with my best friend who's Korean American. And we went back, and prior to going to where our reunion was, we went into the kind of the restaurant bar area prior to going in the back because we said we'll hit the restroom first. So we did that, and as we walked in, the entire restaurant got quiet. And I was just looking at her and I said, is that us? Like, are we doing this? And she said, I think so. And I'm like, oh my God. And having, I guess, worked on Wall Street and in New York, it's very diverse. So I hadn't really experienced that as an adult. So I was just like a little surprised by it. We left the restroom and then our reunion was in the back. So we crossed through again and we went to the back. Before even reaching our reunion, like the bunch of students, there were people going back and forth and stuff that we went to school with. Before even getting there, I start hearing, oh my God, it's Raj. And you look the same, and getting hugs and kisses and just, oh my God, it's so good to see you, which I guess, which contradicted what I just experienced, right? And then I realized then in talking to them and everything, I'm still the same person. They don't see this, they see me. And when Oak Creek happened, my high school friends were the ones that reached out to me and connected with Sikhi. And they said, we know you're Sikh. We know the Sikh community is small. And I never realized the impact my growing up with them had, but it made them aware of Sikhi. I was the only sick in school. So my brother and I, so they knew us. We were active in sports and clubs. So it really hit home when I went back for my reunion, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like one of the only minorities here.
Yes, that's a very interesting story. And when you were at school, like most of us at secondary school, we probably both learned about Newton and the scientific revolution. And I remember learning about Galileo and Copernicus, and I had no kind of linkage of like, well, what were our gurus teaching at that time until quite recently, when I know that Guru Haraiji was a contemporary of Newton. Newton lived from he was born in 1643 and he died in 1727. Guru Harai was born in 1644. So they were contemporaries. And whereas Newton, he kind of this emergence of the scientific, logical, linear, mechanistic kind of thinking took more and more influence, Guru Harai was talking about the environment and our oneness with the environment. And he was, this is what I learn now. I didn't learn this as a child. I didn't learn this while I was learning about the scientific revolution. I didn't learn about our connection with the environment. And so now when we look at the recent interest in environmentalism and climate change, and now I can make the connections between, well, our gurus were teaching us that 400 years ago. And it seems as though we went in like there was one pathway, there was the scientific revolution pathway, and then there was the other pathway which kind of highlighted environmentalism and our oneness. And it's as though our education became more influenced by one rather than a balance of the two.
I think I would comment by saying I vaguely remember learning about Newton and Galileo in school. I don't think in the States, maybe that curriculum is brought to the forefront as much because maybe of I mean, I actually don't know. I don't know why I'm blanking out on learning that much. But I will say, to your point, I think growing up, because my parents had constantly given us the Sakis Khalsa school on the weekends, would reinforce that so we could ask questions. And if our parents didn't know the answer, then we could bring it to Khalsa school and kind of have that discussion with more of the teachers who were in academia, and then they were teaching us in school. But I do see a resurgence, obviously, of environmentalism, and with everything that's going on with the climate, it is something that we should, as Sikhs, be at the forefront because this is what our gurus taught us. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm in agreement with you, but I think I'm lacking that part of the real education because I don't think I got that in the States.
Well, I grew up in a town where there were very few Sikhs, about 30 families altogether. And so we didn't have the privilege of a Punjabi school, for example. So all the information I had about Sikhi came from my own family and my own, community of about 30 families, as it were. So, but even now there isn't a Punjabi class in Stafford, but I live in Birmingham, and in Birmingham, at the larger gurdwaras, they do have Punjabi classes. And so I'm guessing that they teach, what the gurus taught us, not simply about meditation, but also about how we interact with the environment. But there wasn't anybody to make the connections between what we were learning in one culture and connecting it with what we were learning in the European culture. Because also there was the age of enlightenment round about the same time as our gurus. I think Guru Tegh Bahadur and Guru Gobind Singh Ji, at about that same time, we had the emergence of the age of enlightenment in Europe. And so the age of enlightenment, it's about thinking for ourselves and not kind of relying on the priest to be the intermediary between us and God, and going away from superstition and finding out, experimenting and finding out the truth for ourselves. So they were contemporaries, that these ideologies were becoming more and more influential, but until recently I wasn't bridging the two.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know how to comment. I think, again, from my perspective, I grew up very differently because even though we were very few, but were scattered around, we would all come together on the weekends. So there was one Gurdwara in New York that we would make the trip 2 hours one way every Sunday. It was such a commitment that I value so much that my parents did, because then that brought the Sangat together. Then they opened up the first Gurdwara in Jersey, which was still an hour away. But that environment was definitely there. Also, we were blessed with some, I guess, more modern kind of thinking aunties and uncles. One of them I particularly remember, she's actually an author now. She wrote a Punjabi, I'll do a plug for her, Menus and Memories of Punjab or something. Her name is Veronica Sidhu. She actually married into Sikhi. And she was our history teacher, our Sikh history teacher, our Virsa teacher. So we teach Boli and Virsa, even Gurbani. And that was given to us through the Khalsa school, but reinforced by parents. And everybody's level was definitely different based on what they did at home, right? So, but the discussion was always there, and we would learn from each other. And I think the parents, adults, aunties, uncles, we all learned from each of us. Just because if we heard something in school, we could bring it back in and then have a discussion around it. So, yeah.
You come across as a very integrated human being. You've had the benefit of having education from both sides and being strong, and I'm assuming that that reinforced your self-esteem and your self-confidence, whereas I know a lot of people similar to myself where we it's as though our lives were fragmented. We
Mm.
had our English life, which was at school and with our friends, and then we had our Sikh life, which was with our families, and never the twain shall meet. So that fragmented existence can undermine our self-confidence, because we're not bringing the wholeness of ourselves into anywhere we go. We're not bringing the wholeness neither into our Sikh environment nor into the English environment. And so this is one of the reasons why I've chosen this topic of synthesis, because I do believe that we need to bring the parts together to become integrated wholes, because then that's when our power lies, in that integration of everything that we are.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll give you two examples. And it's never been fragmented for me. You're absolutely correct. I've been, I guess, fortunate, right, to be strong. And I don't know how my parents did it. I only wish that I could give a little bit of that to my boys, right? And I see that there is a little bit that has gone into them. My oldest, when he was in fourth grade, came home flustered, very upset, and very scared and nervous, and kind of like, how am I going to do my homework? And I was like, what's the problem? And he said, I need to choose my favorite song and get the lyrics for it. And then from that, I have to write a poem. And I'm like, okay, so what's the problem? He said, I have a favorite shabad. I don't listen to songs. I have shabads. And then I started thinking, and I said, okay, well, why don't we do Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? And he's like, no, Mom. And then it came to me, I grew up with Song of the Khalsa. And it's such a beautiful song. If you've heard it, I think in England they have, I know many camps have had it over there as well. And it talks all about the courage of the Sikhs and the story of the Sikhs. And I had the lyrics already printed in Guru Sahib's room. So I brought that down to him and I said, will this work? And he said, yes, yes, this will work. And he brought those lyrics to school, wrote the Khalsa Way poem, which to me was really synthesizing his entire existence. Everybody knew that he was a Sikh, he's a proud Sikh, and he got the confidence from that. And to this day, he's now 17, and I still see that very much in his life. And now I have 3 boys, and I see it within all of their lives. So that definitely has helped them as it helped me. The other big thing I think that helped me in the synthesis or integrating is I didn't have any other Sikhs around me. My friends would come to my kirtan, right, at my house. My American friends, my non-Sikh friends, they knew Guru Granth, they knew what kirtan was, they knew what the Guru Granth Sahib was, they knew. So now when they came to my son's Dastar-bandi, they knew they had to cover their heads, they knew it's best to wear pants, and it was very integrated. And now another aspect is I'm now teaching at the business school back home, back in the Jersey Shore. And I can see that I understand the mentality of the students because I grew up there. But they seeing me right away stereotype me in a different way. But when I start talking and referencing areas around, they open up like anything. Oh my God, you went to Ocean Township High School? Oh my God, you know this teacher? Oh, that's your friend. And it's really opened up. My old track runner with me, he held the record at the university. So when I mentioned it to the track athlete, he was like, oh my God, you know him. So there's an instant bond right there. And then they look beyond. So yes, I think you hit it on the head. I never fragmented my life. It was always together.
Excellent. And you see, and that shows up in your presence. You show up and your presence your confidence oozes out of that presence, which is not fragmented, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I will say that I did have friends, definitely that would be completely a different person outside. And the minute they turn the corner from home to get on the bus, the sweaters come off, the pants become mini skirts, and the hair comes down, and definitely they lived two different lives. I'm not one to judge, right? But I knew that that wasn't for me. I wanted to be one person that I represent to my parents and to my family and to my friends. And I couldn't, it would be too difficult for me to manage too many different personalities. I don't think I could do it.
And it is difficult. And because it's so difficult, that's what undermines the self confidence.
Mm.
So much of the energy goes into, um, just struggling to keep those worlds separate, that we don't have that energy to put into the things that would really enhance our lives.
Yeah, yeah, I do see that. I definitely see that. It's definitely been beneficial for me to not do that and to bring, so everybody knows in my class right now as well. I'm always mentioning something about Sikhism, and it's not a it's a business class, but I'll bring it in just because it's on the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, well, that leads me to Maharaja Ranjit Singh, because Maharaja Ranjit Singh, I looked on a website, and he was voted he was voted the top leader in the world by some historians. And I just found myself kind of saying one of the top leaders. And actually, he was voted the top leader, but I hesitated to say he was voted the top leader because I couldn't believe it myself.
The strategy behind, right, was amazing. And the fact that other historians have picked up on that, that to me is immense. And we as a community should be uplifting and should be able to, right away, it should roll off our tongue. Yeah, he is the most strategic leader.
Yes, it's just, and again, it's because I don't know enough about him that the reason I hesitated to say he was voted the top leader is like, do I have enough backing, credibility to say that out loud? And again, it's that's to do with our, in order to have the confidence to feel that we know what we're talking about, we do need to have done our own research. And if we haven't received an education in that area, it's kind of like a superficial knowledge, and with the superficial knowledge we don't have the credibility or the platform, I suppose, upon which to rest our case, or to argue our case.
Yeah, yeah. But I will say, given the environment today and the whole presence of social media, many people seem to be experts on things that I don't know if they all have the credibility, right? But if you can sell ice to the Eskimos with that much confidence, I think you will be successful. So sometimes I fully agree with you, but I think sometimes what I'm seeing right now with the youth, with actually across all ages, if you're able to confidently deliver your message, you can always do the research if needed later, but at least get your message out. Don't hold back and not give your message, because then that will stifle you and you'll not be able to really communicate what you really truly want to.
Okay, well, let's kind of continue with the Maharaja Ranjit Singh case, I suppose, where we Sikhs had an empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh's rule. So there was a great empire. It was a very flourishing, prosperous empire. And then he died, and the East India Tea Company took over, basically, annexed the Punjab. And at that time, the East India Company was obviously gaining a lot of power, and they were fueled by the first industrial revolution, the steam engines, the railways, and we didn't have that. That came from Europe, that came from
Yeah.
Britain,
Yeah.
and we didn't have those innovative technologies to be able to compete.
Or the infrastructure in place. I mean, we didn't have anything, right? Yeah.
Well, we had infrastructure, but not the kind of infrastructure that was going to make us like the global leaders in science, I
Yeah.
suppose. but and so and then we had the steam engines, we had electricity, and again, electricity wasn't developed in the Punjab, it was developed in Europe, and so we were kind of playing catch up, and so for 100 years, maybe 200 years, we've been playing catch up in the sense of as though the Western education, it's put on a pedestal, like if somebody has a Western education and they go to India, they will probably have a better job compared with if they only studied in India. Maybe even now, maybe even in contemporary times, I have a feeling that it's still the case. The reason I have that feeling is because I still teach a lot of students who come to England from India, but we don't have students going to India to learn.
Right, right, yes, yes. And I think language also plays a big role, right? Because English being the primary language around the world, getting the education in English versus in India's English is different, right? So because they would smatter it with maybe other languages, it wouldn't be primarily in English. Maybe, I'm not sure. I never studied in India, so I don't know. But that would be my assumption, that maybe it's in Hindi with maybe a little bit of English here and there, but it's still broken English, or it's not the the British English being taught by non-Indians, I guess, in a sense.
Well, during the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the language of influence was Persian.
Hmm.
So, and then when the British colonized, they changed things, and they made the official language of Punjab Urdu rather than Punjabi and Persian. And it was like,
Yeah.
so that kind of undermined the level of literacy, because during Maharaja Ranjit Singh's time, 80% of the population were literate
Hmm.
in Punjabi, which is very accessible. But when it was changed to Urdu, a lot of people didn't speak Urdu, they didn't write in Urdu, and so the level of literacy, by the time we gained independence in 1947, it was a very low level of literacy. Which 100 years before that, it had been a very high level of literacy. And our Guru Granth Sahib Ji is written in so many different languages. We have verses in Persian, in Arabic, in Sanskrit. It's a multilingual book.
Yes, yes.
So there's no English in it.
No, agreed, agreed. No, I was commenting on the comment that you made about still today being that people come from India and learn at the like coming from India and coming to London or England to learn. You don't have it the other way around. That's what I was commenting
No.
on.
But I suppose in those days, people were kind of like attracted to learning Persian, because people always want to learn the language of influence, don't they? And I think
Yeah.
that nowadays Persian has lost its authority in India, obviously, um, but in the western side of the Punjab, Urdu is more prominent compared with Punjabi, because Urdu is seen to be a language that is kind of more influential in terms of literature
Yeah.
compared with
Yeah.
Punjabi. But again, it's like, well, we have all these different languages in Guru Granth Sahib, and I don't speak Persian, and I don't speak Arabic, and I don't know Sanskrit, and then there's a part of me that's thinking, well, you know, in a way, I feel very illiterate because I'm not able to read our own holy scriptures, and yet I'm so educated in the Western world, but it's left me practically illiterate in my own spiritual kind of, the nourishment that I would otherwise derive from my
Right.
own spiritual inspirational scriptures.
Right. Um, yeah, I see your point. I think that definitely the translation is lost, right? But I wouldn't, and I say this for any language, even when we're studying here in the States, we have to pick a language, and I studied Spanish, right? You definitely lose it, but your mind expands, right? And that you learn another language. And I love languages. So for me, picking up Spanish led me to Portuguese. Then I had a driver working on Wall Street that would bring me home, and he was Arabic. And I would just ask him to teach me conversational Arabic. I can't read it, but at least if I'm able to just meet someone, I can at least have a very, very simple conversation. But it opened my mind, right? When I went to France, I would want to learn at least just to initiate, to say parlez-vous anglais, right? Just to say that, look, I love your language. I don't know how to speak it. I value it. I cherish it. But it shouldn't hurt. It shouldn't stop me. And the same I would say for scriptures. Yes, the translation is absolutely lost and you don't get the full, like to explain Chardi Kala is how we started. To explain that concept is very difficult. But I wouldn't not try to explain it to my non-Sikh friends because I would want them to get some sort of understanding. The same would be like if I was to explain to you what a juicy peach tastes like, you can only experience that if you were to have a juicy peach, and then you would be able to understand it. So even though we may not understand it in the scriptures in the language it was meant, right? If we get a glimpse and then we experience it, then it all synthesizing comes together.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Because I think my initial kind of knee-jerk reaction was, oh, I don't know Persian and I don't know Arabic and I don't know Sanskrit. And that means like I'm at a loss, I'm at a disadvantage. And you've explained it perfectly, because I think the point of having all these different languages, numerous languages in our Granth Sahib. I think the learning is that we can see truth from many different perspectives, and simply because I can't read Sanskrit doesn't mean to say that I don't have access to the truth. We can receive the truth in so many different languages. I might have read the Bible and found the same concept that is being advocated in the Gurbani.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
And being
yeah, and I think that the language shouldn't be the barrier. And I mentioned this, I think, probably in one of our earlier conversations. When I was in Brazil for work, I met Brazilian Sikhs. They're not Punjabi. On the weekends, they would pick me up from Sao Paulo and take me to Serra de Contreira, where we would do part because they didn't know how to read Gurbani. It was translated into Portuguese. Their Guru Granth Sahib is translated into Portuguese. They weren't stopping to not access that knowledge, but they wanted to learn how to do it, pronounce it, so they could hear the vibration or they could understand it. And then that in itself is the uddam, right? The uddam that our gurus taught us, that uddam te karna. If you don't do the uddam and we sit back and we say, well, I don't know the language, I'm not going to be able to, follow it, then we're at a loss. We're shortchanging ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the same time, we may have some of those Portuguese speaking Brazilians may be much more deeply rooted in Sikhi compared with someone who reads the Granth Sahib on a daily basis in the original text. So the language, as you said, it's not about the language, it's about the that earnest, sincere search for truth,
Yes.
which can be discovered in so many different languages. So let's go on to the we were talking about the different industrial revolutions, and I was talking about how with the scientific revolution, it's almost as though we're playing catch up. Now we're in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, where we as Sikhs have as much access to technology, those of us who live in the West especially, and I would say, in the Punjab as well, in terms of technology, there isn't, they're highly educated, so there isn't a lack of technology there now in terms of internet, in terms of cyberspace, in terms of being able to use social media. So it's as though we're more on a level playing field educationally, and we, you and I have access to Sikhi from all sorts of different angles, like not just Sikhi rooted in Punjab, but Sikhi being taught and learned in, across the globe. So how do you think that now that we're with the fourth industrial revolution, now that we are on an equal footing, as it were, how do you think that we are being able to, use what's available to us to connect the dots and to synthesize and to integrate and to emerge as prosperous, kind of equal human beings?
That's a really interesting question. I think as a larger, broader community, I think we're doing an amazing job, right? Because you see across the board, I think the value from the Western society on just the Indian diaspora, the Indian background, the Indian community is, they understand it. They know that bringing someone in from that background into the organization will provide them a different mode of thinking or a different value, the technology level, the interest, the passion, the hardworking, all of these values that culturally I think we have. So I think we're doing an amazing job as a community. Individually, I think to the same extent, we have our stars, right? We have CEOs of so many companies. We have technology, healthcare, finance. I mean, any industry, we are there, right? Fashion, even. In film, we're there. In everywhere, I feel like we're crossing the board. I think the pandemic, and I mentioned this before as well, I think the pandemic has provided us as Sikhs another opportunity for us to really show who we are and how big our heart is. And I think the world has seen that. I think obviously there's more that can be done, but I think that the fourth industrial revolution, as you're saying, is an amazing opportunity for each individual, for the community as a whole. Now, having said all that, to your point earlier, if self-confidence is not there, self-esteem is not there, if the tools are there, but you're reluctant to take advantage of those tools, if you've identified a weakness within yourself or an area of improvement, that to me goes back to the Uddham. If you want to make a change, leave a legacy, have an impact, take advantage of all that's around you, and identify and build your legacy, right? As an individual. And then that obviously goes into the community as well. And the community is behind everyone. I feel that the support is there. And whenever somebody does, like right now in the States, we have a Sikh Jeopardy semifinalist. His name is Jaskaran Singh. The entire community is behind him. We're all watching, we're all rooting him on. The Super Bowl just happened last weekend. We had a family, Bajneet and his wife, and their kids were showcased, right? The entire community is behind them. So I think that we have these opportunities that are coming up here and there, and it's for us to really support, publicly make everyone aware of what's going on, and do what we can do to really intensify the Sikh presence.
Yeah, because with this revolution, I think ethics is going to be key. Because with this blurring of the boundaries between cyberspace and physical, it's who is going to be making those ethical decisions about how we use artificial intelligence, how we use, how we advance in terms of our genetics, even things like vaccine, for example, like how do we make ethical decisions about freedom of choice, because this again goes back to Guru Nanak Dev Ji, when it was like, we will defend those who are being oppressed. And during the pandemic, those people who don't want to take the vaccine, who don't have that freedom of choice to make their own decision about it for whatever reason, it's, we're still seeing those things being played out, aren't we? We're seeing, in our everyday lives, we're seeing kind of this taking away of people's freedoms, or not kind of being very clear about what our values are, and are we thinking simply about material progress, and how are we making sure that the underpinnings of that is spiritual progress, and is it for our individual success, or is it for our collective success? Do we want to be visible as being Sikhs, or do we just want to be put on a pedestal for being who we are, regardless of like our identity in terms of our community.
Right. I think to that, not only Sikhs, I think if people stand by their values, their ethics, their principles, they will be noticed and they will be applauded for that. Definitely within the Sikh community, when we stand for a value ethically, I know that we're known, right, for honesty. Everybody knows if you see a Sikh in the crowd, you know that they're going to help, right? They're going to, service. We're known for service. We're known for integrity. We're known for helping at any point. We're known for standing for justice, right? So that identity was given to us by our gurus. And I think for the majority, we do uphold it. But again, it's at the individual level, right? I heard a story the other day of a friend of mine who went and rescued someone from a burning car. She's a Sikh, the star-wearing woman. Um, I didn't question it. I didn't think twice about it. That's what we do. But everybody else, oh my God, she did this. And yes, I mean, same thing happened up in Boston. Somebody else saved someone else, and it was a Sikh who saved them, right? So I think this happens constantly, but it's really pointing that out. But not everyone does it, right? Not everyone is standing on that. And there is sometimes the shakiness that occurs, especially when you blur the line to get the material possessions or to get ahead in the corporate world. I have a Muslim client who speaks to me a lot about how she had to rise above the kind of drinking pressure that she received in the corporate environment, because that was ethically something that she didn't want to do, and we as Sikhs faced the same thing. So we were able to, share some stories on that. But I think that it's at the individual level. So right now, her focus is on teaching both young youth within the Muslim community that you can still stand by your value and your principle and still be successful. So it's just those stories need to come out a little bit more so that others can get inspiration from that and not maybe yield to the pressures of society and still stand by their values and their principles.
Yeah, and that reminds me again about the concept of belonging as opposed to fitting in, because sometimes people feel pressurized to drink with their colleagues because then they will probably be liked more, because I've heard people say this a lot. He's not the kind of person I'd go out for a drink with. And that's said in a derogatory way. It's like that they don't trust them. If you won't go out for a drink with somebody, it implies that you have to be on your guard with that person, and if people have that kind of attitude towards us, then we're not going to climb up that ladder as easily as the kind of person who is trusted because they go out for a drink and they mingle and they banter in the same kind of way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think again, it comes down to each individual, and if they're able to, within their personality, go out for a drink, but stay true to their principles. I'll go out and I'll have my cranberry and orange. And my entire colleagues knew that. So when I was in Brazil, the drink was caipirinha, alcohol based, but my team members knew that I didn't drink, so they would actually order a virgin drink for me, whether it was a virgin daiquiri or a virgin caipirinha. I don't think you can do a virgin caipirinha, but they were fine with it. We would still go out, and it wasn't a big deal. But it's also the relationship, the building, the friendship, the confidence that you come across with, that you're able to do that. Not everyone can, feels comfortable doing that. So again, I mean, I think everybody needs to look within themselves and muster up that confidence to know that whether people in general will always find, and this is growing up, I think people will always, pick on your nose or pick on your ears or pick on your hair. There's always going to be something. So why not have it be about your Sikhi?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that's your identity, right?
So finally, then, in terms of the way you've educated your children to be whole human beings and to be able to connect the dots, as it were, between these different parts of it, what do you think you've done best to enable them or to empower them to do that?
Okay, that's a great question. And I've thought about this since they were little, and it was one of the things that I did early on. I remembered when I was in nursery school. One of the things here in the States, I don't know if it's across the world, but they would always say, "What did you do over the summer?" Or write an essay about it. And in nursery school, you would draw. It wasn't really so much writing. And I did not know how to draw my father or my brother. My brother may be easier because of the jura, but I did not know how to draw a turban. So when my boys, before entering into nursery school, I taught them how to draw their father. I taught them how to draw their grandfather. I taught them how to draw themselves so they would be able to represent themselves in an accurate picture. From that, it just grew in everything. I saw Sikhi um, in Ninjago. I saw Sikhi in, there was Einstein Little People or something, and Farmer Brown wouldn't leave the barn because he didn't have his hat on, his cowboy hat on. I said, "Oh my God, Farmer Brown is a Sikh." So I just saw it in everything. It just started coming, and I used every moment to teach them Sikhi in their environment so they're able to relate it. When I taught them their ardas, let's say when I wanted them to learn their ardas, I taught them the meaning of the ardas so that they understand what they're saying. Um, I explain to them even now, like for them to do hukamnama before they go to school, like it's ingrained in them. They know that they need to do that. I don't need to remind them anymore. They go, they matha take, they do their hukamnama, then they go off to school. They do their panchbaniya. I think that to me, the action, the presence, the proactiveness, because I grew up here, I knew what was coming down the road so that I could preempt it. I knew that they would have to, for me, sports were really big in my career in high school. I wanted them to have that, plus the diversity that it opens up. My older two boys are in wrestling. They wrestle for the school, which to me, there's not many Sikhs there. There are not many, even Indians who wrestle. And we've gotten them the equipment, we've gotten them what they need to do to maintain their Sikhi, right? They have the mask, and it's not like they're looking, um, odd or out of place or anything. I ran track and I had my running tights on because I don't want to flauntly okay, I don't shave, but it's out there, and you kind of integrate yourself in a way that you're comfortable with, and you put yourself in those positions. So I think even since they were little, it's just been something that I do. My diversity of my friends are there, so they get that diversity. They still get it. They're making their own friends outside of the Sikh community. That helps as well, because then they're constantly having to reevaluate and re-emphasize their Sikhi to people who don't know. And even if you have a huge community that is Sikh, everybody has their own understanding of Sikhi, and for some it may be like, oh, it's okay to do this, for some it's not okay, right? So I think from that aspect, when you put yourself in any of those positions, you realize where you really stand on which side, and um, can you confidently stand behind what you're saying. And for the most part, I mean, all three of them have been beyond my dreams, so strong, stronger than me. They're amazing, and I really attribute that to me knowing what was coming. I mean, from nursery school all the way to now college, I have to think about.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's excellent. And that your strategy in teaching them how to draw to be able to represent themselves accurately, that is, that demonstrates great foresight on your part, knowing that was going to actually either disadvantage them or place enable them to feel that they are able to be representative of who is around them in their community as well. And did we talk before about vegetarianism? I do remember you talking about going to a camp, and again, like there's this political movement about veganism and vegetarianism, and it's part of our own Sikhi, like which has been taught to us for 500 years, and even longer with Hinduism. Vegetarian has been an integral part of Hinduism, and it's like, do we connect the dots between why we're vegetarian and why that's necessary in terms of saving our planet and being able to be sustainable.
So interesting. So vegetarianism in Sikhi, and again, I think it's if you base it on the Rehat Maryada, we're not. You just cannot eat halal meat, right? It's not saying you are vegetarian. Most of the people that I grew up eating meat. Most of the people that I know here in the States do eat meat. Even as an Amritari in the Rehat Maryada, right? It states you can't eat halal meat. Now, having said that, I am vegetarian now. I am Amritari and I don't eat meat. My boys don't eat meat. They don't eat eggs. They definitely abide by it, but that was on their own understanding of Gurbani, right? Of that I don't want to do. But within the Rat Maryada, which is the Sikh code of conduct, it says no halal meat. I think because culturally, Hinduism, vegetarianism, and I know when I was in London, I became a vegetarian when I went to work in London through JP Morgan. And I went and I was eating meat and I went and I stayed, on the weekend with the family or something, friends of ours. And I remember meeting this Uncle G, and I don't know what he said even to this day. I came back not eating meat and I never went back. It's been years. I don't have this craving even. I always thought maybe I will have a craving. I never had a craving. I don't know what he said to me. It made a lot of sense logically. I made the decision on my own. My boys made the decision on their own, right? They stopped eating meat. So I guess from where I'm coming from, after you understand Gurbani, after you read a little bit more, you become more spiritual. Health-wise, absolutely. Your energy level is 100-fold, right? Your body's not digesting all these other, I guess meat that's not necessary, right? But it came on our own. My husband became a vegetarian when he took Amrit, right? So he after about a year after our firstborn, so he also on his own, I didn't force him. I was cooking meat. I would cook meat for him if that's what he wanted. I wouldn't be able to taste it to tell him, so I'm like, you have to taste it. But I think that was just our again, the way that I was brought up. A lot of my friends do eat meat, and they're Sikh friends that definitely eat meat. I'm not one to judge. Sikhi teaches us, who are we to judge? So I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to put my values, my principles, my decisions on someone else. Everybody's on their own journey, and everybody needs to come to their own realization of what works for them and what doesn't work for them. I know that you want to be cognizant of it. So maybe I won't go to an event that, although no, I wouldn't say that, because I was in Brazil and it was a lot of meat eating happening. I didn't shy away. I wasn't offended. Nothing was there. I was totally fine. So I think, again, it's maybe some people are, and they don't want to put themselves in those situations. I'm not one of those people. I'm fine if you have dinner with me and you eat meat. Not an issue. I just would choose not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if that's where you wanted to go with it.
Well, I became a vegetarian at the age of 18. And the reason my mother was always a vegetarian. My father wasn't a vegetarian. My brother who is a Amritari is a vegetarian. My other brothers are not vegetarians. And so I became a vegetarian at the age of 18 following a biology lesson.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. So you say it comes in different ways, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody's on their own journey, and however you come to whatever decision you're doing, as long as you're comfortable and, again, confident in what you're doing.
But I suppose it was again about joining those dots, because in biology, I learned about the loss of energy because we were learning about the food chain. And I learned about so energy comes from the sun, photosynthesis, plants, cows eat plants. And so they're basically being used as machines to transform grass into food. It was that's all I needed to hear. It's like, no, I'm not eating cows simply because or converting grass into and there's all this loss of energy. And so, but connecting the dots with, well, in Hinduism, in Guru Nanak Ji and all our gurus, they they taught about oneness, you know, so like nature is not there for us to conquer. Nature is there and we're an integral part of it. We're interdependent with nature, and
Yeah.
therefore if we are related to nature, then, you know, for me it's like, well, I can't abuse nature. If I don't, you know, I can't kill an animal unless, you know, like there has to be a good reason for killing it. Sometimes
Yeah.
I see little insects in my you know, because I have a lot of plants, and I see these little insects, and I have to, I don't know whether it's the right thing to kill like a little ant, or I usually take it out. I get a tissue
Ah,
and I
yeah.
take it outside, you know, and because it's not meant to be living inside my house.
Right, right. So it's interesting. I've done the same. I've captured the animal and insect and taken it out. On the flip side, sometimes I have killed it and then I rationalize it, because humans, we can rationalize anything. I'll be like, oh, I'm sending it on to their next life now. So I'm like, okay, so I helped it out. I think again, it's to each, I guess, their own understanding, and they'll all come to the same conclusion, but the intersection is definitely there. We are intersected with the climate, we are intersected with the environment. We may be waking up late. So I know in Europe, right, and I know this just because my some of my students are from Europe and they're here, you know, studying. And I asked them, I said, what was the biggest thing that kind of hit you when you landed in the States? And they said the number of plastic water bottles you guys have and use. Because in Europe, it's not, right? You don't even have plastic bags, you don't have plastic water bottles. You know, I know in France, they wrap paninis in paper. And that was their biggest thing. And interestingly enough, in I think the next month or in May, I'm not sure if it was March or May, they're actually going to start banning the use of plastic bags in stores. But we're so behind, whereas Europe has been doing this for years. So I think that it's there. The understanding, the reality is that we're not at the forefront of it. We're not proactive about it. So we are hurting the earth immensely each time when we, you know, we just switched, I think, styrofoam plates, right? From Gurdwara, we're now using the steel plates. Not every Gurdwara does that. When people have kirtans in their home, we still sometimes use styrofoam.
You see, because we, in all the gurdwaras here, we use the steel thal, and the concept of using styrofoam, it's like, oh no, you know, it's like,
Yeah,
so can we see that even in a choice like that, it's the ethics is integral to it. Is it ethical? You know, the gurus taught us to use steel for a reason. They taught us
yeah,
to wear steel gare for a reason, you know. And yeah, so even in a small kind of choice of like, do we use steel or do we use styrofoam, you know, what's more ethical? Well,
right.
the gurus taught us what's more ethical.
And the foresight that they had, right? If you look back at everything that they put in place, from the langar of the equality, and we talked about this, right? We all sitting down together having a very simple meal, not you know, somebody has something else and a better sabji than someone else. It's all the same, and it's usually dal and roti, right? It's amazing and it tastes so good, but we're all sitting on equal footing. That concept back then, and then, as you said, the foresight of steel or iron, right? Um, the so many. I mean, there's so many examples within Sikhi that you like look back and you're like, wow, like the foresight that our gurus had, and for us to not take that forward is our negligence then, right? We need to do that. In the States, every gurdwara should be just like in Europe, but we're not there yet. It's hard. And it's hard to change. Change is difficult for humans across the board. We get used to something, and change, you can look at it, okay, change is an opportunity, let's do something different. But it takes time.
Yeah. Amazing, you know, and so like in this conversation, just even that, the how valuable it is to eat using the thal, the steel thal. I never thought about it until, you know, just in this conversation with you.
Yeah,
Just little tiny little things like that just demonstrate to us how powerful our Sikhi is, like in terms of a way of life, from its little, you know, tiny kind of nuanced um, cultural kind of ways of doing things that we just take for granted, I suppose.
Yeah, and um, because we're so intricately aware of it, we take it for granted as well. So when we're forced in those situations that you're not around, and I did this all the time growing up because I didn't have Sikhs around me, they would ask me, why do you not do this? Why do you not do that? Just the fact that, oh, why do you not drink alcohol? Because it intoxicates you and then you don't have control of your mind, right? That in itself should be enough. But to explain that to my friends, they were like, oh my God. But for our gurus to give that consideration back then, or for them to get rid of the concept of sati, right? That was culturally such a big thing. But why would we, and when you read Gurbani, suicide is not even in, right? In Gurbani, in Sikhi, anywhere. And sati was a form of suicide, right? So all of that, like you think about it, it's mind-boggling, like to get your hands around all the different concepts that our gurus had considered, put in place, and really kind of from Guru Nanak Dev Ji all the way through. The jot was the same, and it was just reinforced in so many different ways.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Rajnarind. I'm going to